You're good to go.
Welcome, everybody, to our weekly edition of CreateAWorld. We are thrilled to have you with us. And if you're with us for the first time, I just want to take a brief minute and tell you a little bit about what we're all about here, and why we come together every week. So if you found your way here, you are probably tapped into the reality that humanity is undergoing a major shift evolutionarily. Um, Things are just changing all over the place. Systems that have been rigid are falling away. We find ourselves often in on ground that is moving beneath our feet as new realities are rising. And so because of that, we need to be connected to each other. And so when we come together and create a world, we do so first of all in the principles of the field of Tantra Maat. And those those principles guide how we be with each other. And they include that everything operates on behalf of everything else. Everything is part of everything else. Everything's in relationship with everything else. Everything has a place. Everything operates on behalf of life and has us exist as whole, and everything is always moving to the next greater whole. And to me, that one in particular is really important for us right now, um, because it can be very easy to be fearful if we look at some of the things that are happening, um, rather than to recognize that we're in a shift, but it's a shift that is necessary for humanity to be able to step back into the fullness of what it is to be a human being. And when we come together in the ether of curiosity. So we're not here to provide answers. We're here to explore. And you'll hear us talk about, well, this is what's going on for me, or this is what I'm perceiving, because we really do want to be sharing our own experiences and not acting as experts. And we invite you then to thus take everything that you're hearing and make it your own and be curious about how it really speaks to what you're moving with in your life. So in the human system, conversation is really how we form community. Um, it's a surface level of how we get to know each other, but it's really in conversation that we really deepen and acknowledge our bonds to each other. And so that's what we're here about today, to have conversation. And again, we ask you to contribute your unique and essential design to this conversation. You can go on YouTube and you can post comments that can be shared with us. And we really do invite you to be part of the conversation, because that brings us joy. So I'm Janice Creneti, and I'm one of the collaborators, and I will let Tantra introduce herself in just a minute. But we've been doing this for several years now. I'm terrible about always changing my name to the Fertile Voice, which I'll be putting up in just a second. So that's sort of who I am in the work world. But I am a firm believer in the power of voice and in helping individuals be able to articulate their voice, because your voice makes a difference in the world. And that's why I love being on CreateAWorld, because it's all about amplifying voices. And Tantra, anything you want to say about yourself before I do a little recap of the last couple of weeks?
Wow. So just to let you all know, I've been through my own transformational experience pretty much the whole month of October. And then you all might have heard I went through a transformational experience from December 1st to April 18th when I had a heart surgery. And I was listening to Janice and I was picking up on something I want to presence in the call, which I think startled me. So I'm a seer, I'm a prophetess, I'm a mystic. I uh, I love to build matrices within which new futures can rise. I love human beings getting in touch with their self and all the multidimensionality of that self. But I also have an uncanny ability to register when reality is occurring as a unified state, a unified field. When reality is occurring as a unified field. So, one of the ways you can think that is that we're always walking around in air, right? Because for us, when we're not walking around in air, we're done, basically. So it's a constant. Well, imagine that air uh, was aberrant or not whole or had a tendency to obscure and distort things. Just imagine that. We call that incoherence. We call a lot of things, but incoherence will do for now. And then imagine that the air shifted and uh, and suddenly that air was operating on behalf of the wholeness of existence, and therefore everything within it has its place. So just that's imagination I'm asking you to use. So it really startled me, Janice, because as you know, I pay attention to that air, that prana, that field phenomenon. Because when you asked me to introduce myself, I could feel not that you, not just that you obviously would not deliver it as a hierarchical request, but I could feel that we were in a non-hierarchical realm. And because I have led a body of work for 60 years next year, one of the things I've struggled with that whole time, as you all know, is I'm constantly saying I'm a resource. I'm not an authority. I'm a resource. And you hired me to be that resource, but the result is yours. So it just kind of threw me when, in a good way, when I was listening to you and you said, "Is there a way you want to introduce yourself?" I thought, wow, I don't think I know how to introduce myself in a non-hierarchical energy. Not as a, I want to get this said, not as like I didn't know that. I didn't know that that I was required in some unspoken way to present myself as an objectified person being that was an authority that then could lead people, which none of which I am comfortable with or like. But it was like suddenly the fetters were off. Suddenly I'm not held in that paradigm anymore. And it is and was startling. so so it's just really easy to introduce myself because it's what I'm interested in, not what well, actually, I got to say I do have an element of being an authority in some of this now, but it took me 60 years to get there, so I didn't start out that way. But I'm not an authority over others. And my work is because I love it and because I love who I get to see people be when we take it on together. So thank you for the question. Totally caught me by surprise.
Yeah, and so the last week, and we'll continue the conversation today, we've been talking about what it is to collaborate with the universe. And our realities in most cultures that are currently active on the planet have been very hierarchical for, I don't know, several hundred, couple thousand years, depending on the civilization or community that you're looking at. And when I probably in my, I guess, early to mid 20s first started to really learn about and read about and explore First Nation communities, one of the things that struck me was how much more collaborative they were. And I spent 35 years working in the public school system, and my experience upon arrival to that system was how dense the hierarchy was. But in my last several years of my work, I had the opportunity to really play with collaboration and really experience it and see the benefits of it. And I don't mean benefits in that very limited, but to just see how it could really blow the doors off thing and open up worlds, create worlds. And I said something last week that I'm feeling called to repeat again, which is the distinction between collaboration and compromise. Because compromise is often something that still comes out of a very hierarchical system. This idea that, okay, well, I want this and you want that, and we're going to meet somewhere on the spectrum of the middle. But collaboration isn't focused on what already is. Collaboration's focused on what can be. And in that, it creates this energy that allows us to shape new realities. Tantra, first, I live in Florida. On the West Coast, where both Helene and Milton moved through. Several years ago, I think it was during Irma, which was the first hurricane I experienced since living in Florida that was a potential threat to my area, like serious threat. And Tantra taught me this process of dialoguing with the hurricane and moving with the hurricane and how to create with the hurricane the most life-giving outcome possible, rather than how to wish the hurricane away or how to send the hurricane away or how to create a reality where the hurricane wasn't going to. Because one of the things that I learned in my exploration of First Nation communities is their impeccable respect for the primordial mother and the recognition that, you know, that nature knows what it's doing and should be allowed to do what it does, because that's how this planet stays in balance. And so it's been a very interesting experience both times that I've done this engagement, and not just 2 times, but these big times of engaging with the hurricane and giving it a voice. Somebody pointed out to me recently, they said, you know, Janice, you call yourself the fertile voice, and in this last round with Milton, you actually gave the hurricane a voice. I had not connected those dots until somebody brought that to my attention. But everything has a place, even a major hurricane. And so,
especially a major hurricane,
yeah,
which
right,
we ought to pay attention to.
right,
Its voice is much louder than ours.
exactly. And yeah, so So much of our conversation last week was about that and ways of moving with that. Um, and we have hierarchies all over the place that are failing, largely and beautifully. Also, something that we should pay attention to, because that's not that's not the energy or the way of being that really supports humanity flourishing, that supports the earth flourishing, that supports communities flourishing. It's collaboration is what supports flourishing. And we each have an opportunity to step into that energy of collaboration just in how we choose to show up in our work, in the relationships in our lives. Um, Tantra gave a beautiful explanation of what that looks like for her right now. And it's a choice where we recognize we have something valuable to bring to the party. But that does not need to repress or push out what somebody else brings to the party. There's a children's book called Stone Soup, where the basically there's this guy and he needs some food, and he has a pot and that's it. And so he tells the people in the community that they're going to make this beautiful stone soup, and if they have carrots, they give carrots, and turnips, they give turnips, and they end up with this beautiful, rich soup that can feed the whole village because everybody contributed their piece. And so I like to think that we are moving into the reality of stone soup, because in that place, there's infinite possibility, there's infinite joy, and there's the true connection that our souls really long for. Over to you, Tantra.
I want to start with I want to make sure words don't land separate from other words, because you said some words that I want to do stone soup. So the first word that she used was collaboration. And what's the other one? Not competition.
Compromise.
Compromise. So we'll start with, and then she talked about hierarchical, which we would then say non-hierarchical. And then I spoke about coherent realities and incoherent realities. And then another phraseology that I want to put in, because I really think this concept of stone soup, I was after something last night in the Australian Magi, and I think you gave it to me, Janice. I didn't remember stone soup. So one of the things we do in our brain, because we've been trained to do that, which is not how Indigenous people think, is we get given a concept and then we objectify it and it becomes a thing that we apply to reality. But it's not our fault. It's the way our modern mind has learned to break everything apart and then demand that another human being be the part we expect them to play. For instance, as an example. So I just want to read two things and then I'm going to attempt Janice's stone soup thing. Okay, so here we go. So we could say a hierarchical compromise type of interactions with human beings, we'll just stay in human beings, is an object-oriented reality. And so I'm going to read what that is. An object-oriented reality is a reality that focuses on individual entities, their distinct attributes, and their interactions as separate objects, hence compromise. This reality emphasizes separation, individualism, and discrete boundaries, often leading to a fragmented and competitive worldview, hierarchical, where relationships are transactional and entities operate as isolated units. So the reason I want to bring in um, God, I can't even retain the word compromise. I'm working on it though. The word the word compromise, the word hierarchical, the word object oriented, the word transactional, the word separation, uh, fragmented competitive worldview is that's the soup we've been in. It really is actually the soup we've been in. We got added to that soup. We didn't ask to be added to that soup. And I have the incredible, mind-boggling, fortunate opportunity to work with people who got out of the pot. So now we'll go to relational field-oriented reality, a reality that prioritizes the interconnectedness. Isn't that beautiful? It prioritizes the interconnectedness, the interdependence of all entities within a cohesive dynamic field, which is what Janice spoke about when she talked about everything's part of everything else, everything operates on behalf of everything else, everything's in relationship with everything else, and everything's moving to the next greater whole. This reality emphasizes relationships, coherence, and collective emergence, fostering a holistic, collaborative, and community-oriented worldview where entities are seen as interconnected contributors to a greater whole, or what Janice just said, collaboration. So the reason I wanted to just take a minute, Janice, to stretch it and pull it, is I just think this stone soup analogy is brilliant because it's soup. We're in that soup. We are in that soup now. And that and the other thing, Janice called me, or I called Janice because I knew the hurricane was headed her way, and I asked her if she'd gone out to talk to the trees because when you're indigenous, you are in relationship with everything, and everything's in relationship with you. It's not a thing you do in an object-oriented reality to go to try to manipulate another thing. So, oh, wow, the birds just broke their bird feeder. It just came crashing down. And I almost was sitting in front of it. So I'm very happy I came in here and the wind was cold. But imagine that if we begin to really realize that there is a collaborative phenomenon occurring because we made new stone soup. Each one of us, and the earth was already doing what the earth does, which is creating harmony, balance, symmetry, proportion, grace, and beauty. Obviously, I mean, anybody that thinks she doesn't do that already has lost their permission to be at the party. But those of us that really recognize that the primordial mother is the generative principle within which we can exist. All she has to do is collapse her ozone layer. We're toast. And so, but now there's this consciousness rising in human beings across the world. I mean, my individual engagements, they're people I don't even know who they are, and I don't know where they came from. But they're in this conversation. They're relational. They're basically there's a soup happening. It just is. And I think we got used to, at least I did, I'll speak for myself, we got used to trying to get somewhere. And I used to think, and I'd say it from time to time, but it was kind of meaningless because it didn't register, that the future will come to meet us. And that's collaboration. And I do believe the future has come to meet us. And evidentially, it's not just, I dislike the word believe. I'm a highly evidence oriented human being. And I have seen evidence of human beings starting to be in tandem. That means move with, to be in tandem with the powers and forces of creation. Of course, today we're talking about the primordial mother, but there's also been, I think I can bring it to language. There's also been evidence of that perhaps it goes beyond the primordial mother. I want to add the silly thing, but as people know, my silly things often are packed, locked and loaded. So when you try them, the locked and loaded comes off the door. The lock comes off the door. But I wrote a journal entry. I've got my granddog Kevin. First his legs on my leg, and now his head's on my. He loves to be in the energy of these things. Now his head's on my knee, and but I had the most curious thing happen a couple of days ago. I had this. I started to think about ethers. Now, ethers in the metaphysical world, scientifically in metascience, ethers are energies, very simple. And we often in our modern world mistake ethers for emotions and feelings, but they're ethers. They emit an energy. That's an ether. It emits a sensation. It emits a feeling. Okay. But I had a real weird thing happen with the dog because I wanted him to stay. I don't remember all of it now, but I'll do the one part. I wanted him to. He was up against me. He'd fallen asleep up against me, and was. I went, oh my God, there's tender. I could feel tenderness, but it was like I had left one reality. I don't remember being in that kind of reality. I remember feeling tender, but we were in tenderness. And in the etheric realm, I was seeing all these little tenderness things like emitting and emanating all over us, like they were excited and turned on and thrilled that somehow we'd entered the etheric realm with them collaboratively. Again, collaboratively. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And then on my Australian Magician of Self last night, these four women, they live indigenous. They live in collaboration with the earth, and therefore they're a few steps ahead of the rest of us in a lot of ways. But also, when you share with them and they talk, you're sucked into that, and you're sucked into what the relational field that they carry because they've lived inside the primordial mother of Australia for so long. And they were talking about last night that it feels like, and I don't know the language, but it feels like something is actually collaborating in truth in the physical world that is both etheric and matter. It seems, and we shall see. So for me, Janice, us coming on CreateAWorld and why we stayed coming on is because for we've been unpacking something and living something and paying attention to something. And I so prefer it to having a dogma or wanting to teach people a certain point of view. So people actually have been moving with us. And two new clients I had last Saturday, both of them blew my mind because one of them had come from watching CreateAWorld by accident. It turned out on a thread or friend had sent her, and the other one had watched something I'd done a few weeks ago. And both of them said, which I thought was fascinating, you all were tracking something that I didn't realize I was tracking too. And you gave it language, which is very different than giving it belief or giving it truth. We gave it language, which gave both of them the ability to wrestle linguistically with what they were paying attention to. And that's just yummy. There's just no way around that. That's just plain yummy to have it be what I call a living field. Not something we're anticipating, but something we're actually having to deal with because it's up. It's our stone soup. Over to you.
So it makes me think about butterflies and the fact that, when a butterfly is going through metamorphosis, of course, it's a caterpillar, and then if it's it spins a cocoon if it's a butterfly, um, uh, and then it basically turns to goo. It turns to goo, and the goo reorients itself into the butterfly. But as the butterfly is becoming the butterfly, it it builds the strength of its wings by fighting its way out of the cocoon. And so if you just cut the butterfly out of the cocoon without allowing it to struggle out, it doesn't have the ability to fly when it comes out. So this idea that each of us needs to take language and and bring it into ourselves and digest it and wrestle with it and make it our own. That's part of how we become the beings that then can move in these new realities. And I think Tantra and I both live in the United States, and here in the United States, marketing is all about removing struggle. That everything should be easy, everything should be fun, everything. And believe me, I'm having just come through Hurricane Helene and Milton, I'm ready for a little ease and fun. But I also had some pretty profound spiritual experiences, I suppose I would call them, preparing for Milton and moving for Milton. And I want those to be a part of the fabric that I'm weaving. And so everything has a place. Confronting language that may throw you off your game a little bit and cause you to question, and that's good. Everything has a place. And it will help you, come into a new understanding that you have that is really your own. In my teaching world, I will often say to people that there's teaching and there's learning. And I mean, now I have a much deeper palette, I think, of what I describe teaching to be, but really the ultimate goal is learning. And to me, learning happens when somebody has been able to make something their own, right? And so when you're learning something, you have to be able to get in and splash around in the mud and be messy, and figure out what makes sense to you and what doesn't make sense to you, and move with all of that until you then can construct an understanding that is truly yours. And when that happens, true learning has happened. And certainly as a classroom teacher, I, for years, saw the difference between, a student simply, regurgitating something I told them versus coming to a deep understanding where they could actually own something and apply it and teach it to somebody else. And so we're not teaching here, but we're creating this space where you can try on all of this stuff that we're talking about and see how it fits for you, and adjust what needs to be adjusted, and integrate, what might be missing for you. But all of that is on behalf of you being able to spread your wings and fly like that butterfly.
I just want to, the one thing that we can't get out of right now is we are in metamorphosis. We are in metamorphosis. We can't get out of it. And when you're sitting on the beach and the sun's beautiful and you're getting to splash in the waves, that isn't rule for life. It's a moment in time. And when you see this funnel coming at you from across the waves, it's there is a metamorphosis in that moment because you can't be what you were even 5 minutes before. And you have to call on aspects of self that because it's in your face. And so that analogy of it's in the butterfly's face when knows it wants to get out of that cocoon. It's just in its face. It either will or it won't. It either will or it won't. That's metamorphosis. That's a key element of metamorphosis. And I think there's something highly spiritual right now, a gift, I think. Because up until, well, it's hard to say because we're talking about time, but for a long time, humanity has been able to control its environment. Now, truthfully, it was always going to lose control because it was never control is not part of the game. Collaboration is part of the game, is the game. But now we are losing control. And so very primordial instincts start to wake up. Simple, I got to get out of this. And it calls on deep, deep primordial intelligence and kind of wrecks our logical brain because we're not used to it. We're not used to being in the fabric of I don't know what to do and I don't know what's happening. We don't actually realize that's the butterfly's wings strengthening its wings to get out of the cocoon. That actual struggle of not knowing, that actual dealing with the unknown and confronting the unknown is the gift of metamorphosis. It's the gift. And I found that it's terrifying. And it's terrifying because we have felt that everything was under control for so long. The fact it wasn't doesn't matter. The perception was quite real. And so this body of work, I just want to share with people, this body of work we're doing right now in the Magicians of Self, it's really, I could spend a year on it, and I might. We'll see who wants to play. I might spend a year on it because we're so distant from relational fields. We're so distant from it. We have objectified each other. You don't give me what I want is a baseline. You're not doing what I think you should be doing. It's very baseline. So the concept that a human being is responsible for their relational field, their ether. A relational field could be kindness. Could be just my relational field is kindness, whether it's an opposing force or someone I like or someone who's in trouble, but I can be counted on for that relational energy, that relational field. But the reason I'm bringing this up, and I'm bringing it up now, is because by the time we get to the end of next year, this conversation will really be meaty. It'll be chewy. It'll be lived. Because the only thing we have left is relational fields, or what people call relationships. I prefer not to use the word because relationships are too object oriented. Like relationships are like husband, teacher, seer. And I don't mean that. I mean, where are you going to go play? Are you going to go play in kindness? Is that your relational field? Or are you going to go play in humor? Like I've taken on lightheartedness. And believe me, I am not geared to lightheartedness. I am geared to dragon. Let's burn it up and get it done, kind of thing. But I can tell not it's not about my individuated identity. It's because I can tell lightheartedness will generate a metamorphosis for me and for others needed. So it's not just what's mine, it's also what's needed from our view, from our view. And it's going to have that metamorphic energy because the butterfly didn't know what it was doing when it was just struggling to get out of the constriction. And you've heard me say this, but one of my humor things is I say to people sometimes, you're like the butterfly. When you say to the butterfly, oh, what beautiful wings, and it's flapping its wings, going, what wings? Because when you create those energetic realms, they're invisible to the naked eye, but yet they rule everything. They rule everything. So over to you.
Yeah, it's funny. It makes me think of how many times in my life people have described me as being courageous. And I don't think of myself as courageous because in my mind, courageous is, you know, parachuting out of an airplane or, deciding that you're going to climb Mount Everest or that sort of thing. I think of it in a very physical way. Whereas I think the ways in which I have been courageous in my life are often emotional. Um, and because I have such a bent towards authenticity, I would say that that's definitely a relational field for me, authenticity. Because I was such a bent towards authenticity, then emotional courage doesn't register for me as courage. It registers with me as authenticity. And and I think that's another one of the things that I feel upon us at this moment, Tantra, is for us to shed this foolishness of being humble. Not that humility doesn't have a place, but I think for a lot of us that find ourselves in conversation like this, hubris is not usually our things so much that's in our way. It's often, I think, more a lack of hubris. And, sometimes we could use a little hubris to say, I am that, and where I am, that is. And that's what it is to create new worlds, is to say, Tantra has said to me many times in our time together, it's nothing till you call it. And I think we're in a place as we see all of these realities that we've known falling down around us, and we ask ourselves, then what? Recognizing that so this is our time to call it. I have called collaboration many times in the school systems when nobody was asking for it. Nobody was asking for it, and many people were not particularly grateful for me for bringing it into the mix. But it was what was needed to evolve to the next greater whole. And so I think we're all finding ourselves in a time as well where we say, what am I called to put into the soup? Because if you listen, there is something that you are being called to put into the soup. And now is the time. And while there are ways in which it may cost you, certainly there are ways in which it cost me to bring in collaboration when it was not necessarily being asked for. But what I got out of it was so much, I mean, so benefit, cost benefit analysis. I got so much more out of it than it cost me. And so, it's there are going to be costs in this time. But to me, the benefits that are available far outweigh.
I think I'm going to introduce a great mystery. It's my great mystery, and it may not be a great mystery to anybody else, but I think I'm going to introduce a great mystery, which I'm pretty excited about doing. But would you define hubris, given I do not know what that term means?
Um, Probably a simple way to say it would be ego in terms of how we, so, and
Uh,
when then so this sort of negative connotation that we give to ego.
so
Yeah.
assuming that one is right or one knows,
What's best. Yeah.
what's best. Okay, got it. So I was talking to Janice before. I don't know. I don't know. You plucked the magic twanger here. So here I go. So this is to create total confusion. That's what great mysteries do. They evoke total confusion. I was just looking at the chat, and so I'm just going to now evoke confusion. So before Janice and I got on the phone, I had an interesting series of things happen that seemed to have no fit with anything except disturbed me greatly, but not disturb me negatively. To understand, disturb me greatly. And I was talking to my guy, and I was talking to him about um, I was just a real bitch when I was young. And what I mean by that, if you dared me, I'd do it. And if you told me I couldn't, I would. And probably a hubris moment, probably very much in hubris, to be quite honest. And then I was on a call with the Australian Magi last night, and they were talking about the rodeos and the Brahma Bulls, and I didn't know we're in Australia. I know they're in Canada, but I didn't know they're in Australia. So I told them I used to be a clown. My name is Daisy, for the Brahma Bulls, and that's no small, but it's this bitch thing. Like, and the other clowns would get so mad at me because I just put myself in harm's way. You and me, Cal. You and me, Cal. Here we go. And then the guys that kind of have to save my butt. But it was that whatever I'm calling a bitch, Yahoo may, I mean, YouTube may erase us for this, the bitch. It's a feeling that I really loved about me. And so what I said to Janice is, it's like something happened recently in the last, well, since December 1st, where I don't seem to have that thing that I'm calling that bitch. And I miss it. I actually miss it. But what you said about hubris really fascinates me because I had it in the defense mechanism of survival.
Mm.
And now I want it back as a delight, as fun. And so I was saying to Janice, oh, now that the cat is out of the bag, I'm singing YouTube for heaven's sakes. Because I was talking to Jess, my housemate, and just this odd thing started occurring to me. Like, I'm 78. I've had a terrible time with my RV. She hasn't worked since 2020. She now works, but so it cost me a fortune to um, license and insure her. And then it suddenly occurred to me, well, why I don't drive RVs very well. Why don't I just take lessons? And then that evolved, sort of like the butterfly thing. And then that evolved into, what if I sold my house and went on the road? It's 78. I'm having this conversation with my head. But I could tell that thing that would have made me do it in the past isn't there like that anymore. but maybe I can regenerate it back as fun and excitement, not power over, in my case, power over another, power over a circumstance, power over a cow, which is probably the more stupid thing I did. But the point I'm making is it's the underpinnings, it's the air we're breathing. It's not in the action that we're doing out here. It's in the what's the underpinning of the action. And the underpinning in my case was I had a huge survival strategy. And I was also telling Janice I wanted to take this course that I couldn't take because I was a freshman and it was a graduate course. So I went ahead and came to the class anyway. And the teacher was really pissed at me. But he said you can audit it if you learn to fall down the stairs, which I did. But then two days
It
ago,
was a theater class. That's
it was a
probably
theater.
important.
That's right. Sorry, it was a theater class, and I wanted to take this theater class from this guy. But 3 days ago, I fell, and it's not like I haven't fallen before. And I could fall without harming myself, except my toe, because I'd taken that class. And I remember sitting on the floor going, "Wow!" And it goes back to this butterfly thing. What is that thing? Like it kind of seems stupid for the butterfly to work so hard to get out of that chrysalis. I mean, it just kind of feels stupid. And in our view, probably. But what is that thing inside of us that's literally shifting the very paradigm of the source space within which we take action? That's what's exciting to me. That's the great mystery. Because it's like what happened when you first started talking. I went, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm in a different energetic field. That something is no longer containing us. Something's no longer forcing us into a survival model. Maybe something is resourcing us back into being generative beings that just love being alive." That's the mystery I wanted to presence for us today. By the way, there's no immediate thought of selling my house and taking my RV on the road. But the fact that the thought even came to me, I find stunning. Okay, Janice, what else?
For some reason, this is bringing me present to my, I made a recent trip to California. Not staying in Florida is part of the metamorphosis that is up for me. And so deciding where I'll go next is, part of what I'm moving with right now. But so I made a visit to California and, I'm very, very connected to marine creatures of all shapes and sizes. And so I had scheduled 2 whale watches to go on, and also with a company that takes you out on a little boat. It takes you out, it's called a Zodiac, and so there's only 6 of you on the boat with the captain and sometimes the first mate. And so I'd scheduled 2 of those, and also time to kayak with the sea otters and the seals. And I went out on the first trip, and it was an incredible trip. And I've done a lot of whale watching, and some of them have been, wow, we've seen a lot of stuff, and some of them have been seeing nothing. And so, but on this particular one, we actually got close to a whale that was breaching, and that breaching is when they sort of come out of the water, and this whale was just breaching over and over and over. So we got to see it like 4 or 5 times. And there was a gentleman on the whale watch with us that it was his very first time. And so everybody was telling him, okay, just so you know, this does not happen every time. But so when we were pulling back into the dock, the captain was, joking about that again and saying managing expectations. And I had registered to go out again with the same company so that he knew that I was coming back. So when I came back from the second trip, I said to him, I know, my expectations are managed. It's okay, it's okay. Um, and most of the trip was not quite as spectacular as the previous trip had been. And yet, just as we were turning to go home, he found a pod of orcas that had moved into the area. And so there was three mothers and three babies, and one of the babies was only a week old. This little teeny, you see this little teeny tiny fin come out of the water. Um, but so so when we got back to the dock, I said to him, I'm like, Brian, you may have ruined me for all other whale watching experiences by now. Um, but it just brought me present to this notion of managing my expectations. And I feel like I've spent a lot of my life managing my expectations. And I I don't particularly want to do that anymore. I really I think what's in front of us could be quite miraculous. Um,
That
on
is
scales
brilliant. Yeah.
on scales we can't even imagine.
Yeah.
And so I say, let her rip.
Guy, I love that, Janice. But here's a funny thing because I don't, there's another thing we could do a whole hour on because everything's part of everything else. Isn't it interesting? Went and did that whale watching, and all of a sudden, my project now is to get the RV done, enroll my daughter in going with me. Jess is already glued to the side of the RV, and go see the whales birth
In
in
Baja.
Baja. Anyone that wants to go, we can make it a caravan. And but isn't that interesting? So then we have this collaboration. Good way to end this talk. Who called who? Who called who? And maybe the expectation of the whales and the orcas is equal to ours now. Maybe the expectation of the primordial mother and us is shared. Maybe we're in shared expectations because we don't have to be separate from each other anymore. Pretty cool. Pretty cool as a possibility. And the only way we as human beings are going to know we're back in a collaborative relationship with Earth and the cosmos and the ethers is this is what we'll start to live, which equals what you just said a few minutes ago. And there is evidence that's real, that just very much may be real. And when I first started this body of work was in 2014, because a couple of years before I'd been at Acoma and an Indian reservation, and I was shown about these times in a way that basically shifted me into all the work I do now, basically. But one of the pressures on me was to make human beings able to perceive and to not be trapped in the limited realm of reality that we had gotten born into, but to be able to perceive and register these moments, of where we're all part of a greater whole again. We're all part of a realm of reality that while it's only the human sector that's breaking down, by the way, everybody. The other elements have been in collaboration with the primordial mother and the cosmos forever. It's just the pseudo structures that kept us separate from life that are breaking down at this time. And we're breaking down inside of them. And we're going to get to make stone soup and get out of bloody chrysalis at the same time. I hope it doesn't cancel it for bloody. Oh, well, we put the whole YouTube thing at risk. Okay, we're done. Are we done, Janice? Would you like to close for us?
So thank you for being with us, for being in conversation. And you can continue to have conversation with us on the CreateAWorld Facebook page. So we encourage you to go there and share as things come up for you. And we hope you'll join us next week.